I'm Orestria, and these are my seasonal impressions for spring 2021. And let this be known as the season of missed potentials. I was watching so many shows, it took me basically the whole season to catch up. And despite dropping very few shows from the first episode or two, I dropped a ton of shows around the 5-episode mark. I don't think I've ever dropped so many shows midway through before. I've ranked the shows from worst to best. Of course, it's in my opinion, and if it's just a show that I think is good but didn't click with me, I will say so. So you might find something of interest for you in my find section as well. There are only very few shows that I actually finished this season, and even fewer will be in my recommended section at the end. Also, I have 2 special reviews scheduled for the end, so stay tuned, or just use the YouTube bar to skip ahead, I don't care. First is my Nope category. These are shows that were a hard pass for me. The first show is Dragon Ie o Kao, or Dragon House Shopping. That's not the official English translation, I didn't look it up. This show is about a wimpy dragon trying to find a house where they can be safe. In this world, most dragons are very fearsome creatures, but also very lootable, so our wimpy dragon needs to be careful. I wanted to like this show because I was enjoying the world building. The first few minutes of the first episode, you don't even meet our main character, and that was my favorite part of the show. We started with a scene of some slimes touring a dungeon cave with a real estate agent, and it was like slime newlyweds, like talking about all the features of the cave and how it would protect them from adventurers, and it was awesome. But then we meet our main character, who is particularly painful, and the comedy just didn't work at all from then on. Blue Reflection Ray, which is some kind of magical girl show. I think there was a girls' dorm, that's what I remember. It was really boring. It was only 2 minutes in when I started to turn up the speed, and then I started skipping around, and even skipping around, I still only made it 11 minutes into this thing. A show can be slow and not be dull. There was no intrigue, I wasn't interested in characters, there was no like gorgeous animation or gorgeous designs to really get you interested. There was just nothing happening. The following show is not slow, at least. Osana Najima ga zettai ni makenai love comedy. The rom-com where the childhood friend won't lose. When I was scripting this, 2 months after watching the first episode of the season, this is the only show I literally couldn't remember. Every other show I could read the title and basically remember the plot and what I thought about it. This one, I had to Google it to see what it was. This is a romantic comedy that takes place in a high school. So, it's already got some barriers to overcome. The show is based on the classic love triangle between the main character, the childhood friend, and the hot girl. I liked the first 2 minutes, at least according to the tweets I made at the time. The main character encounters the hot girl, they have a little meet cute, there's a few different sides to her, and they kind of have an interesting engagement. Our hot girl is a model who models racy photographs for magazines. Not porn, she's in high school, but like underwear shoots and stuff. And basically the show is trying to give her a character where she's outwardly kind of cold and maybe a bit of a bitch, but like secretly she's sweet. Which is a pretty standard characterization. But they just put her way too far on the bitch side for me. She just sits there shitting on anyone who actually likes her photographs, and it's like, if you are this opposed to racy photographs and the people who enjoy them, don't do them. Like, there are other ways to make money as a model. You don't have to do this kind of shoot. So now I am way less interested in this model character than I used to be, but that's okay because the childhood friend isn't going to lose, right? So let's meet our childhood friend. Our introduction to the childhood friend character is her confronting the main character in front of the entire class about him not agreeing to go out with her when she asked him out previously. Doing this in front of the entire class says she's not looking for a conversation. She's looking to shame or embarrass him into dating her. Ugh. Better yet, when he turns her ass down again, she tries to play it off like it was all a game, like, oh, you really thought I was coming on to you? I was just joking. These are the characters we're rooting for? Another rom-com, Irajanai de Nagatoro-san, or Don't Bully Me, Nagatoro-san, is a high school comedy mostly about a girl bullying a boy about his art. I found none of it funny, and it went beyond that and actually made me uncomfortable. I guess this is like a fetish thing for guys who want to be bullied by a hot girl. And if that is your thing, check in with this show, because maybe you'll like it. I am not qualified to judge it. There was a moment I genuinely thought it was about to transition to horror, which probably would have been an improvement for me. Look at this face. This is the kind of expression you see in like an edgy horror show when a character has just snapped and is about to start killing someone. What can I say about Bakuten? It's hard to be a Fujoshi baiting show after the wild success of shows like Yuri on Ice, Free, and Skate. Our main character is a guy who likes baseball. He's on the baseball team, but he's on the bench, and his team loses anyway. Feeling lost, he goes for a walk around the large sports complex where the baseball game happened, and finds some very sexy, flexible boys, and becomes interested. Soon enough, he finds the rhythmic gymnastics competition happening. The boys from before step on stage, and oh god, the CGI. It's a bad sign for your rhythmic gymnastics show when I start giggling 2 seconds into the performance. Your mileage may vary there. Mother's Basement specifically praised the animation in his What to Watch video for this season. You be the judge, I guess. You would think with CGI it would be really easy for them to put in the arena and populate the area, but no, we exist in a dark void. And to emphasize the utter nothingness, the camera is completely zoomed out, which makes the character models look like they have no detail. And they look like game models. There's something about their movements that looks like jelly. The most energy in the whole scene is right here where it cuts to 2D animation for a moment. And it wasn't until afterwards that I realized that the scene is 3 minutes long. When I was watching it, it felt like 10 minutes. Meanwhile, a 2-minute Yuri on Ice routine goes by so fast that you're like, oh my god, I have to go watch that again because I feel like I missed all of it. Featuring better animation than our previous entry, Massacre Party is clearly geared more towards kids. A young boy is introduced to a new card game by his best friend, and through a series of circumstances, the creator of the game chooses this boy to get a special device which allows him to summon the monsters from the cards in real life. It's basically like Yu-Gi-Oh!, Cardcaptor Sakura, and Digimon all had a baby at a dance rave. I was genuinely having fun with the first episode, even though it was clearly geared more towards like 8-year-olds. It was fun, energetic, and an appropriate level of silly. But even just in the first episode, the sheer amount of reused animations was already starting to get to me. Everything this boy did had an animation sequence that I knew I was going to be seeing in every episode. And in case that wasn't bad enough, the next episode on segment shows him getting an invitation to a special school. He's already a school kid and we have to have him go to a second special magic school? I didn't watch any more episodes. Our next show is the kind of show where I'm going to have to read the title off the script and take a deep breath before doing so. Kyukyoku Shinka Shita Full Dive RPG ga Genshitsu yori mo kusoge dattara. AKA, Full Dive, this ultimate next-gen full dive RPG is even shittier than real life. Our main character likes full dive VR RPGs, and no, he's not going to get stuck in one. At least not in the first episode. He has saved up his money to buy the new Final Fantasy game. He's having a kind of shitty day, but he knows that he pre-ordered this game so he can just go pick it up after school. He's got the money. It's awesome. On the way, he runs into some bullies. It seems like this is a really common thing, and he just kind of bribes them and goes about his way. Unfortunately, when he gets to the store, he realizes that instead of giving them the $10 he'd meant to give them, he'd accidentally given them $100. By the way, this was excellently done. As someone familiar with Japanese currency, I was shocked that he was giving the bullies $100, and so the reveal later that he'd meant to give them 10 and had accidentally given them 100 really worked. He had a shitty day, and all day he was just looking forward to that light at the end of the tunnel of being able to play his new game, and now that's not going to be able to happen, and, I really relate to that. So out of desperation, he starts going to various stores, and he ends up at this really small store. And he's just hoping he can find somewhere with the game for a little bit cheaper, although it seems like a really unlikely thing. The allegedly sexy store clerk tricks him into buying a different game, an older game that she swears is amazing. And, instead of calling the cops, because there's this hot woman offering to help him with the game, he decides to go with it. You'll notice I said allegedly sexy. This woman has pyramid boobs. I seriously wonder if I could watch a show that thinks this is what a woman's body looks like. I'm bi. I like breasts. I have breasts. These don't look like breasts. I know you're gonna think I just chose one screen cap where they looked bad. No, this was just what they looked like. Look at this picture again. They are larger than her butt. And not shaped like breasts. Adding to the pile, there's a totally unnecessary scene where he walks in on his younger sister in a state of undress. This is the only scene the younger sister has in the show. I like attractive female characters in things. It's just when you can tell their sole purpose is for fan service, especially when it feels like the fan service is there because fan service is expected. If the show cut out the 3 seconds of the little sister thing, drew the shop attendant in a sexy way that actually resembled anatomy in some manner, and didn't show me a basically naked girl in the ending, I probably would have watched episode 2. The plot was not terrible, but I would say it has a major flaw. And the flaw is I'm not sure how it's going to build stakes. Being a video game that he's not trapped in, nothing really matters. I think they're going for this idea that you can't restart the game, so you're stuck with your choices. But A, he can still just stop playing the game. B, it still has no effect on his real life. C, no wonder no one buys this shitty game that you can't restart. Do you have to beat the whole game? An open world RPG, beat it to be able to play it again and try different builds or try different routes. The actual game part was pretty interesting. Basically, the idea is he has fucked up the beginning area so hard that it's kind of hard to be believed, and he can't restart. Again, that lacks a lot of punch, seeing as he can just not play the game anymore. And then the shop attendant returns as a badly drawn sexy fairy, and The next show also had some good parts before totally losing my interest. Seven Knights Revolution, Eiyu no Kei Shosha. I honestly liked the majority of this first episode. There are towns being ravaged by strange monsters. There are 2 girls in military-esque uniforms on this steam train trying to chase down these monsters, trying to get to a town in time to actually save the people, but they keep arriving too late. And then we meet a boy, and he's in a town that's mid-attack. And we're following him as he tries to escape the monsters, and we know the girls are coming, but we don't know if they're going to get there on time. So it was really effective at building that tension. And then the girls reach him, and it all kind of goes downhill. We discover that in this world, people fight using the spirits of previous heroes that are inside them. Fine. We get the standard main character actually has a really powerful hero inside them, and even though most people go through a long time of training, he's going to figure out how to use it in the middle of battle and save the girl that up until this point in the show was represented as being super competent. Fine. I don't love it, but it's fine. And then I discover those aren't military uniforms. Those are school uniforms. And our main girl is the school council president. And he is a prospective student, and they're going to bring him to the school. And because I actually liked the first episode so much, despite the school twist, I still decided to watch the second episode. And it was just bad. I want the initial premise back. I want a dark fantasy show about powerful girls going around in their steampunk train, fighting a losing war against monsters trying to save towns. Our next show is based on a game, Subarashi Kiko no Sekai, the animation, or The World Ends With You. This show has a very stylized animation style. It's CG, but by making it more stylized, it helps it to blend and look good. Kind of like Akudama Drive had a very stylistic CG blending situation too. But in this show, somehow, it still looks this bad. But really, the CG was not at the garbage bin, I can't watch this level. It was fine. My biggest problem with this show was that the Reapers game it was based on wasn't very well defined. Every time it would try to introduce something about the game, the pace of the show was going so fast that it didn't feel like it made sense. I usually really enjoy a fast-paced show, but I feel like this one was so fast-paced that it was skipping over important details, including helping us get engaged with the characters. I found most of the characters very bland. It seemed like the only thing to make them stand apart was more in the character design rather than in the personalities. And the main character was a deadly combination of bland, too cool for school, and has amnesia. What can I say about Cestus, the Roman fighter? I don't personally want to watch a 15-year-old slave boy box his way out of slavery in ancient Rome. It had a very kind of middling presentation and pacing, and it was brutal in a way that wasn't fun or stylistic or interesting. And Nero is now a cute anime boy who feels bad about the killings. Ooh. I do feel kind of bad about where I put 86. This was a perfectly good setup for a sci-fi war show, and the quality of the show is more than acceptable. So, we're introduced to a utopian society where everyone has white hair. Of course, it's not really a utopia. They've banished everyone who doesn't have white hair. The war isn't being fought by drones like the citizens think. It's actually being fought by these people. And even when they die, it's not counted as a casualty because they're not really people. Our main character is one of the people living in the white-haired society, and her job is to remotely control the battalion, give them information, and help them fight. And she's opposed to this system of not counting them as real people. She wants to get to know them. She feels bad when they die. She's willing to try to spread the word that there are real people fighting in this war and people are dying. Again, I think this is a good setup for a sci-fi war show. They decided that what they should do is do a dual point of view thing. So in one episode, you'll see the same events 2 times. One time from the controller and one time from the battalion. This is another thing that's not a bad idea on its face. And I've seen shows that have used showing the same event from 2 point of views very effectively. It just felt like every time we went to the controller, the whole episode, the whole pacing got ground to a halt. You would see the more interesting characters in their daily lives, and then going into battle, and then grieving, and the horrors of war, and then you would go to this woman sitting in a chair feeling bad about things. The problem is that in this particular show, the controller's not really doing much. The controller scenes are basically all the same. She talks to someone who thinks she's being a little too gung-ho about non-white haired people's rights. And then she goes to work, she talks to the people, there's conflict because the battalion people aren't very happy with the white haired people for obvious reasons. And then she directs them in the fight, and you see her reaction to, like, someone dying. My second main issue was with the exposition and the world building itself. There's a scene of an old professor lecturing to some students, and, like, the camera showing that the students are bored to tears. And it took me about 40 seconds of this to realize that the professor was literally giving exposition that the show wanted me to know and remember. The show was presenting its own exposition as boring. And given that the world building it's expositing just doesn't make enough sense to me, that it's like triple bad. According to my understanding, this war is effectively over. The side that they're fighting are using, like, mechanized drones, but they've already defeated the other country, so the drones are all gonna stop working after a set amount of time. So the war is not really a war right now. It's just like a tower defense game where, like, as long as they survive long enough, they'll be fine. I could be wrong. Again, I didn't even realize it was an exposition scene at first and had to go back and watch again. It also made it sound like the exile of the white-haired people was really recent, like 4 years ago. I don't really want to bring up a political discussion of certain historic world events in Germany. I do get that these things can happen faster than you expect, but even if it did happen that fast in, like, 4 years under the duress of war, I still feel like 4 years is not enough time for everyone to literally forget that it's happened and everyone to be okay with it and society to just completely ignore it. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm too optimistic, but it just didn't work for me. In contrast, my last Nope show is something of a full dumpster fire. Fairy Ranmaru, Anata no Kokoro o Tatsuke shimasu. So there are these fairies, and they have different elemental clans, and the fairy queen has chosen one member of each clan to go to Earth and gather energy for her by saving people. Of course, they're going to school, and they're also living and working in a bar. The first episode of this was so gloriously bad that I thought it was going to be a really fun trash watch. Clunky exposition? Yep. Terrible world building? Yep. Like, somehow one of them is already the student council president, and one of them is being introduced as a new transfer student, but they all arrived at the world at the same time. The characters are 100% stereotypes. Yeah. Like, if you just think about the elemental clans, you know their personalities already. And the show saw Madoka and missed the point and said, we can be weird too, yep. This show feels like a bunch of men made a list of things that they had heard that girls liked, gave it to an AI, and told it to make a show. The ending is basically softcore shibari porn. And the OP falsely gave me hope that they were, like, gonna go crazy halfway through and start killing each other, which would have been amazing. If you've ever wondered how women feel when we're looking at a show where every female character is in ridiculous scanty clothing and is being objectified, if you've ever wanted to experience that for yourself, feel free to take a look at the designs of these characters. See how it makes you feel. Otherwise, pass. Alright, next is the fine category. This season there are a lot of shows that got left here. They just couldn't quite grab me enough to stand out in the crowd. But the thing about shows in the fine category is I think that if they're a topic or genre that particularly appeals to you, they could still be good and worth it. So I think these are definitely worth a try if they sound interesting to you. For example, I'm not an expert on cute girls doing cute things shows, and Yakunara Mug Cup Mo, Let's Make a Mug Too, just seemed really normal. I have no interest in the feature topic, which is pottery. I don't think it stands out in terms of quality or characters, and one of them was actively annoying me in the first episode. But if cute girls doing cute things is your preferred genre, there wasn't really any competition this season, so you could check it out. Shaman King is a Shonen Jump property from back in the day when I was reading Shonen Jump, and it also had a previous anime adaptation. I know for a fact that I read the manga. I can't remember if I watched the anime. I do love older properties getting updated animes because a lot of the older shows were really drawn out. Like Sailor Moon seasons would be like 100 episodes and only like 10 of them had to do with the plot. Meanwhile, Sailor Moon Crystal, you just get the plot and it's not all this crazy filler. So I watched episode 1 and I liked the music. There wasn't anything wrong with it. There was nothing wrong with it. It was exactly the story I was expecting because I'm familiar with the show and familiar with Shonen Jump properties in general. But there were so many other shows I was watching, I just didn't feel like I needed to watch more. Like, they weren't bringing enough in the animation or enough in, like, the pacing, enough in the presentation to make me feel like, yes, I'm going to spend my time on this. I dropped Jujutsu Kaisen, and if I had to choose one to watch more of, I would probably choose Jujutsu Kaisen just because I think it's bringing more twists to the genre than Shaman King would. But if you like very traditional Shonen Jump properties, this one's fine. It's great. Go ahead, watch it. I do think this next show suffers from some pacing. This is Sayonara Watashi no Kramer. Goodbye, my Kramer. No, I don't know what that means. This is a girls' high school soccer show. It's a lot more dramatic and serious and a lot less flashy than the sports shows I usually watch. The character designs actually remind me of Ayazawa. They made Nana and Paradise Kiss. But those shows usually have flamboyant fashion, and these characters really didn't. At first, I really liked the kind of down-to-earth nature of it, the way the characters were interacting, their motivations, but then it got to their first practice game, and I feel like the pace just slowed to a crawl. Like, they go into this practice game knowing they're going to lose. We go into the practice game knowing they're going to lose, and we spend 2 episodes watching them lose the practice game in the way that we expected them to. And I'm not saying nothing happened, like it was being used to motivate certain characters, but it was obvious it was going to go that way, so it taking 2 episodes to get there just felt kind of painful. And in the battle of the sports shows, I would rather watch Kabaddi. Shakunetsu Kabaddi, aka Burning Kabaddi. Did I say Kabaddi enough? No, I didn't, because in this sport, apparently you just say Kabaddi, 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 Kabaddi. This sports show is not Fujoshi bait. I mean, the Fujoshi will still make Yaoi Dojinshi, but that's not the point. The first episode was funny and full of action, and taught me about the sport of Kabaddi without being totally overwhelming with the rules. There were 2 main reasons I stopped watching. One was just because I was watching so many things, and there were other things that I was more interested in. And while it wasn't a major part of the show, there was just enough kind of toxic masculinity jokes. Like jokes about guys holding hands or guys being close. They were just enough to kind of tilt the scale down and make me less interested in the show than I might have otherwise been. Our next show is Fairy Tale in Space. Eden Zero is by the same author as Fairy Tale, and I assume that, like Fairy Tale, it is pretty much the definition of perfectly fine shonen. I watched a lot of Fairy Tale. I did not watch a lot of Eden Zero. I really liked the first episode. It literally made me cry. The main character has like a gravity-based fighting power, and given that this show is going to take place in space, that seems like a really good match, and I feel like there are so many cool things you could do with that power, and especially like they've kind of stolen One Piece's setup where like One Piece can drastically change what's happening by going to a different island, and the different islands are drastically different because this is space, so they can go to different planets, and the different planets will be different. And if some planets have like higher gravity or lower gravity, what effect will that have on our character's power? Like, that's really exciting. First 5 minutes of episode 2 had 3 flashbacks to episode 1. Episode 1, which was already a well-made, effective episode and sticks in your head. And that's when I realized that this show was going to have lots of great bits. There were going to be lots of cool things that I would enjoy, but it was also going to waste my time.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
I watched more of our next show, Godzilla Singular Point. I feel like they wanted to go for Godzilla Singularity Point, but then didn't for some reason. This show is predominantly watching vaguely quirky characters technobabble about animal theoretics and theoretical materials with an occasional monster attack. One group of main characters creates pretty much the world's best AI, but doesn't use it, and makes it available for free on the internet. And the only person in the world using this thing is this other main character who hadn't met the first group of main characters yet. And I couldn't beat the feeling that it was the kind of show that's constantly telling you how smart everyone is, but they don't do anything to make you feel it. Also, I had watched 4 episodes, and there was nary a sign of Godzilla yet. So there's that too. Another old school property, Battle Athletes Daeundokai Restart, is a remake of a 90s show that I never watched. The girls are competing to be the Cosmic Beauty, which sounds like a talent or beauty competition, but is actually an athletic competition. Daeundokai means big sport meet, basically. And the girls are representing their own celestial body from our solar system, meaning that in this world, the various planets are populated. So there's a representative from Mars, a representative from Venus, etc. Things I liked. I liked that this show had more people of color than you see in a lot of anime. I liked that the girls are cute and attractively drawn, but they're in reasonable athletic wear, not like scantily drawn clothes. I just wasn't engaged enough to keep watching. This is probably an easy 5 or 6 out of 10, but I'm trying to get better at dropping 5 out of 10 type shows, especially if they're not like exactly a genre I'm super into. Just given the sheer number of shows that come out these days and the number of shows on my to-watch list, dropping a 5 out of 10 show or even a 6 out of 10 show gives me a better chance at finding another 7 out of 10 show. So I dropped this one. This is the same reason I dropped the next one. Tokyo Revengers! Before I start, if you are interested in this show, and quite a lot of people are, and people seem to be happy with it, don't watch episode 0. Episode 0 is like a recap episode of the first 2 episodes, but it came out before the first 2 episodes, and it just ruins the watching experience because it like takes out all the subtlety and the build-up and just shows you the events. And genuinely, I probably would have liked episode 1, maybe the whole series more, if I hadn't watched episode 0. I didn't even finish episode 0 because it was that bad once I realized what was happening. But it was a bit too late. In the show, a very normal, very washed up guy finds out on the news that his ex-girlfriend from high school died, and then finds himself in a time travel loop back to high school. In high school, he was a thug. And a rival group of thugs are actually responsible for his ex-girlfriend's death in the future, and he kind of feels like his whole life went downhill after high school and after he broke up with this girl. So the goal becomes to change history, save the girl. Personally, episode 2 just kind of lost me. It wasn't bad, but nothing was really grabbing me. And I'm not, like, naturally excited by watching high school thug things. And it's really hard to do a, like, time-traveling time loop show and make it satisfying. Sentou in Haken Shimasu, or Combatants Will Be Dispatched, is a comedy sci-fi by the same author as Konosuba. I haven't seen Konosuba, so I won't be making any direct comparisons. Earth has been all but taken over by an explicitly evil company, and they send one of their elite soldiers, our main character, through a portal because they're a capitalist, so if they've conquered Earth, they need to discover some new markets to infiltrate. The new world they go to is a place of magic and demons, but the evil company is all about megatech, so there is a lot of fun to be had in those contrasts. Seeing as he works for an evil company, our main character gets evil points for bad deeds he does, which is literal currency that he can use to buy weapons and supplies from back home. Now, the kind of evil deeds he tends to do are things like grabbing a woman's breasts, but it's strangely more palatable when it's being framed as explicitly evil and being done by an asshole for nefarious purposes. This show had some really funny parts, some very interesting parts, but it never reached that level where I was just excited to see what happened next. And then, over time, the small things that bothered me just kind of started to pile up. But if you are more tolerant of pervy humor than me, or if you particularly liked Konosuba, this is definitely worth a watch. There are still some moments that I remember that really stuck with me, and my second favorite sexy demon girl of the season is in this show. Also, just for fun, here are 2 different characters drawn in the exact same pose with magically moving belly buttons in order to make sure their belly button was visible in their ridiculous outfits. For a wildly different vibe, we look to Mars Red. From the first episode, I thought this was going to be a contender for show of the season, but over time, I just lost more and more interest. And then some small issues I had started to kind of build up. I still think the first episode is absolutely excellent, though. It was like its own slow, moody short film. This is set in a world with vampires, but it's not your standard vampire story. In this story, it's about the government of Japan trying to militarize vampires so that they can stand toe-to-toe with England on the world stage, because this is a historical fiction. Unfortunately, it felt like whatever I was interested in, the show wasn't, and vice versa. In the first episode, the slow pace worked really well, but that was more of a self-contained story that sets up the world in the background. The slow pace continues in the next few episodes, and it just feels like it's dragging its feet. And then somehow there are these moments, and the show presents them as like, whoa, this is a big moment, and the audience is going to really react to this. But despite the slow pace, it somehow felt like these things weren't adequately set up. Like, you can tell watching a show when they think you're going to have a huge reaction to something, when they think this is the moment. And there was one of those scenes, and I literally had zero reaction to it. And if you know me, I am easy. It is not hard to have me go, or like have me cry, or any of these things. I'm such an easy audience member. And then it happened again, where because there's a slow pace, I have more time to think about things. Things like how the only recurring female character is an annoying reporter who seems to have more or less no real point in existing in the show. Like, I get that soldiers in this era would all have been men, going on the historical fiction side of things, but the first episode showed us that they were perfectly willing to get a female vampire and recruit her. So I just am left wondering why none of the vampires in this military unit are female. There were 2 members who weren't military men. There's a crazy scientist and a mysterious, is actually the oldest member of the team, but they look basically like a teenager. And either or both of those could have been women, and why not? Please. We exist. Our next show also features a lot of male characters, although at least this time it's in the title. It's Bishonen Tantei Dan, or The Pretty Boys Detective Club. This show takes place in high school because it is an anime, and in the high school there is a pretty boy detective club. They want to help people with their problems, but only if they can help in the most beautiful way. Seriously, you have never heard the word beautiful so many times per minute as if you watch an episode of this show. Each member of the club is both beautiful and has a special skill that they're great at, such as being an excellent orator, being an amazing cook, having amazing legs. This show was an experience. The frame is filled with stylized, beautiful animation. The character designs are gorgeous, and I'm a sucker for a cross-dresser storyline. The thing is, this show is very, very talky. And it's like they're trying to balance out the talking with the visual splendor. But the combination, for me, was actually very exhausting. It's like trying to take in everything that was on the screen and read all those subtitles. And the way they talk is very dense. And I would just actually feel kind of tired after watching an episode. And there were a few episodes where I was in that, I'm going to stop it after this episode unless, something. And then they'd have, a little cliffhanger or a little hook at the end, and I'd watch the next episode still thinking I should drop this, and then eventually I just actually dropped it. Another show with strong visuals, Joran, the Princess of Snow and Blood, is set in an awesome steampunk Meiji era. And we're following a group of assassins who work for the government to repress rebel threats. We might be the bad guys here. Our main character, a Lady Snowblood type, is one of these assassins, but her goal is not actually to protect the government. She wants to kill this mad scientist who is making human-beast hybrid monsters, because this scientist killed her entire village and clan to get a hold of their special blue blood. I went on a real roller coaster ride with this one. At first I was super interested, and then I was starting to lose interest, and then something happened and I got really interested again, and then just... It doesn't help that the character that I was the most interested in, it was just kind of revealed that their goals don't make any sense, and the plot was getting really convoluted. Spoilers for the second arc. The character that I was most interested in comes up with a complicated plan to help the main character escape from the assassination life. And it works. And at first he doesn't even know that it's worked. But then he finds out that it worked. And she has successfully left the life, and she's happy. And then that upsets him, so he goes to ruin it all. And it doesn't help that as soon as the main character got out of the life, it was like she lost all her worldliness and common sense. We have reached the illustrious land of shows I actually finished watching. Seijo no Marioku wa Bannou desu. The saint's magic power is omnipotent. This is a slice-of-life isekai show. One of the things I liked about this setup was that the 2 characters who were isekai'd were actually summoned on purpose, so everyone in the new world knows that they are from a different world. They're summoned to help save the country from monsters, but it's also clearly not that urgent a problem because they spend a lot of time having a casual fun life before anything remotely serious starts happening. There's some minor political drama, but it's probably not enough to sate your appetite if you're really into that type of thing. There's also some romance, but again, it's probably not enough if what you're looking for is romance, it's very milquetoast and very, like, cute. Like, I think maybe they held hands by the last episode. The main joy in this show is that it has nice world building and comfortable vibes and pretty enough art. The animation's not very great. The plot is kind of choppy. Like, when you're adapting from a light novel to an anime, of course you're going to have to cut some content or maybe rearrange things. But usually you can't literally say, oh, they must have cut something there, when you haven't read the light novel. But you could kind of tell in this show. I guess overall it's actually very pedestrian, but it was just like the right kind of topic and vibe for me. I really enjoyed watching it while I was eating dinner because, like, nothing was going to ruin my dinner and I could just kind of relax and enjoy it. I'm not even sure I would watch a second season because of those, like, choppiness issues, unless maybe it got, like, an art upgrade or something. Meanwhile, I don't really know how I feel about Shadow's House. I guess it's neither an isekai nor does it take place in high school, so that's something. I've placed it over The Saint's Power is Omnipotent because it has really strong visuals, nice animation, and a lot more of a plot. It's still a bit slice of life, but it's also got, like, courtly politics and mystery mixed in. The show takes place in a mansion where the shadows live, and the shadows are people who are literally completely black. Like, you can see it on the screen, they're 0000000 black. And each shadow has a doll that serves them. And the dolls look identical to them, but also look more like people, so you can actually see the facial expressions. So in addition to cleaning the rooms, which the shadows constantly emit soot, and if it's not cleaned away, it will actually turn into monsters. In addition to cleaning up, they are literally to act as the shadow's face for all the courtly things, so they need to be on the same page and be able to emote and act as their shadow master. I spent almost every episode thinking, I don't know how I feel about this. Okay, I guess I'll watch one more. And I basically one-moored myself to the end of the season, but if there was a second season, I don't think it would watch it. The next show, I would. I packed my witch hat! No! This is another show where I'm just gonna have to read the title. Slime taoshite 300 nen shiranai uchi ni nattemashita. Or, I beat 300 slimes and maxed out my level. That's probably not the official translation. Do I want to watch a cute, humorous slice-of-life isekai about a witch? Hell yeah! You've probably heard about Japanese people getting overworked to death, and I think there are two Japanese cultural attitudes that really feed into that. One of them is ganbate, try your best, and the other is gaman. Gaman is like, just bear with it. You often hear Japanese people say shogunai, which is like, it can't be helped, it can't be changed, which feeds into that idea of, so just bear with it. And this show is like, fuck that. Her main character dies of overwork, and then when given a choice about what she would want in her new life, she says she wants the ability to have a slow, relaxing time and to be at her own pace. So she's actually given a new life as an immortal witch. And anytime a character in this show is like, I'll work myself to the bone to get it done, she's like, no! Take it at a reasonable pace! I love it. This is one of those fantasy worlds where people have levels for some reason, which is really popular in isekai. And when our witch character goes to town to get food every day, she defeats a few slimes on the way. And so basically over the course of 300 years, by doing a little bit every day, she's accidentally maxed out her level and is basically a godlike being. She doesn't care about being super powerful. In fact, she finds it really annoying when word gets out and then suddenly everyone is coming out of the woodworks to challenge her to prove that they're the most powerful. Which brings us to another theme this show has that I really like, which is that of the found family. Most of the people who come to challenge her or to ask for her aid, she basically ends up adopting. There are some slime girls, a dragon girl, Beelzebub, Lord of Flies, as a hot demon girl. I will say this up front, there are some really bad episodes, and this show is terrible at pulling off any kind of surprise because it's just obvious what it's doing all the time, which also means that it's usually not actually that funny. But it's really successful at being chill and relaxing. I watched all the episodes, and I liked all the characters, except for the drunk, horny elf girl who's incapable of not fucking up. Next is Mashiro no Oto, Pure White Sound, another show that I really thought was an anime of the season contender after the first episode. Our main character plays the shamisen, which is a traditional Japanese instrument, and he learned it from his grandfather, who's like a shamisen playing god, but never sought out fame. The first episode sees our main character head to Tokyo, feeling completely lost after said grandfather's death. The animation and character designs are absolutely beautiful. The music was amazing. I have no interest in shamisen, but wow. And I loved all the characters. A tale of a lost young adult in Tokyo with no real goal or ambitions, trying to use their music to make their way while dealing with their grandfather's loss is the kind of story we don't really get in anime, and it's so refreshing. And one of the scenes in the first half of the second episode is pretty much my favorite scene of the entire anime season. If you've seen the show, you're already aware of what I'm going to say next. Our main character is not a young adult who's going to be finding his way in Tokyo. He is a high school student, and starting from the second half of the second episode, he's going to high school, and there's a shamisen club in high school, but they don't have enough members to enter the shamisen competition. This show has amazing visuals and amazing music, and a really successful emotional way of imparting how the music is making people feel through the visuals. I just do not care for the plot once our main character enters high school, and I do not like the high school characters half as much as I liked the characters from the first episode and a half. I finished this one mostly out of momentum and because there's nothing actively wrong about it, but it started out so good, and then it just became kind of a well-produced normal show. Speaking of momentum, Yukoku no Moriarty Season 2 is much better than Season 1. Probably because Season 2 has an overarching plot and progresses to an actual conclusion, and the first season was mostly episodic setup. This show is about Moriarty, the Lord of Crime, trying to take down the corrupt aristocracy of England to improve the world, and Sherlock Holmes trying to figure out who he is. I talked about this show in the seasonal impressions video for Winter 2020, so you can see more about it there, but in summary, it's just not the kind of show that's going to be to everyone's tastes. I talked about it in the seasonal impressions video for Winter 2020, so you can see more about it there. I think it's kind of a niche choice. You kind of have to be into this kind of like pretty boys in a dark fantasy, lighthearted but also sometimes grim vibe, kind of like Kuroshitsushi. I liked it a lot, but that's less a mark of quality and more a comment about my personal tastes, which is the reason I have it here in fine. I just don't think it's a broad recommendation. And we have arrived! The best shows of the season, the fabled recommended tier. The first show I'm recommending is Fumetsu no Anata-e, or To Your Eternity. And I must say right up front, I'm not finished it yet. No one is, because it's continuing into the summer 2021 season. Because it's not concluded yet, I'm not comfortable calling it the best show of the season, although it very probably is, unless it completely screws the pooch somewhere along the way. I described Mars Red's first episode as a moody short film, but the first episode of this is an even better short film, which is absolutely heartbreaking. I was a bit worried that the entire show would be cry porn, like just sad story after sad story, but it's not quite like that. There's a lot of sad stuff, but there's also a lot of respite. In any case, our main character is a rock. Our main character is a rock. Well, an orb sent to Earth by a godly being for mysterious purpose. It learns from encountering objects, and it can actually become objects it's encountered. First it becomes a rock, then a wolf, then it encounters humanity. I don't think there's anything else I can say without spoilers. Watching Fumetsu no Anate is like watching a Ghibli film. But one of the darker ones, like Mononoke Hime, and instead of being a movie, it's serialized over 20 episodes. The only reason I'm not choosing this of anime of the season is because I haven't seen the ending, because it's not ended. A lot of shows do either self-destruct or aren't able to wrap things up satisfactorily. Vivi, Fluorite's Eye Song is a sci-fi time travel show about an artificial intelligence android. It gives me Terminator, Ghost in the Shell, Nier Automata, Macross Plus. I barely remember Macross Plus, but it had a lot of singing, right? Our main character is an AI singer that works in an amusement park. A different time-traveling AI comes to recruit her aid in preventing the AI uprising and the destruction of the human race. This show is gorgeous, it's touching, it has fun action. I think with any time travel premise show, you can sit around and poke holes in the plot, but overall, it's a strong show. If you're on Discord, then you already heard me talk about this, but you know the feeling you get when you finish a really good book and you've just been so immersed and you're just left and you literally can't do anything? Like, you can't start another book. You can't watch a TV show. You can't play a video game. You just, like, sit there. I got that feeling after one of the arcs in this show. And I don't know how to give higher praise than that. And now it's time for Best Boy and Best Girl. You may have noticed that my favorite shows this season don't have a lot of male characters. Vivi seems female-identified. Matsumoto could be seen as male-identified, or could be seen as, like, an it, because it's mostly a cube or a teddy bear. The main character from Fumetsu no Anate is a shape-shifting rock. So there just wasn't a lot of competition for Best Boy. It's basically which Moriarty character will get it. Last season I would have given it to the titular Moriarty, but I actually feel like he got a lot less screen time this season. So I'm gonna give it to Bond. James Bond. I don't know why I went for an accent there. That's clearly a mistake. James Bond is another person who is rescued by Moriarty and ends up joining his gang of merry men. I was a bit disappointed because James Bond was very important in the first arc, and then in the latter half he got less important. But I also understand because the last half of the season is trying to wrap up the show, and so it has to put the star back on Sherlock Holmes and Moriarty. I haven't read the manga, so I'm kind of hoping that James was a bit more important there. Meanwhile, the competition is very high for Best Girl. Vivi is awesome, and I basically already declared her show Best Show of the Season. There is a character from Fumetsu no Anate who is amazing, but I don't want to spoil anything about that. So, fuck it. Beelzebub, Lord of Flies! She's a demon, but demons in this world aren't evil. In fact, they are actually pursuing world peace. And she's like the second mom of the group. She's very helpful. She actually gives them a spell to summon her when they need help. I don't want to miss the chance to talk about this problematic situation with hot demon girls in anime, because they're often depicted with darker skin. And this really stands out because in anime, very few characters have darker skin. And there's the issue of colorism, where in media, pale skin is often portrayed as being, more good, both in a good and evil sense, and also in like a more beautiful or more pure sense, which your skin color doesn't have any effect on that. I mean, Japan is a different culture, but you still see that even with Japanese people, where they're always avoiding being tan. If you go to a beach here, you'll just see like beach parasols everywhere instead of people lying out getting tanned. It gets even weirder when you think that she comes from a show where demons aren't evil, and she's also relatively light-skinned for a member of this trope. Ugh. I do really like this character. I just wanted to point out that trope. What's that? Video's not over. I promised 2 special reviews. Good heavens, just look at the time. We finally got the conclusion to last season's Wonder Egg Priority. How was it? Well, it's such a disaster it actually made people look back on the previous season to try and figure out where it lost the thread. Even at the end of the season, I was wondering how they could possibly wrap things up in one episode. And then I saw the OVA was double episode length, and I was like, oh, maybe there's hope. And then the first half of the OVA was a recap episode in a show where we already got a recap episode. Like, we got a recap episode because they couldn't get the new episode out in time, which meant they couldn't finish the season, so they had to put out an OVA for the conclusion, and then the OVA is half recap episode. That's the disaster we're in. All the things I was most curious about at the end of the season were not really covered in this OVA, and it was basically a teaser or setup for a second season, which is probably not happening. If you want a lot more detail, I'll recommend the Mother's Basement video on it because I actually think it was quite good. I will say I don't regret watching this show because I think I would prefer shows were overly ambitious and tried to do something great and failed. And from the Mother's Basement video, I got the impression that it was a lot of these people's kind of first show, and I think for a first showing, it's absolutely amazing, and they might produce something really great in the future. But it definitely kind of sours the whole experience of the show. The OVA isn't that much different than the show. It was having the time between the show and the OVA to reflect on things, and then the OVA kind of ends up shedding light on the show's many failings. Iterazumi no Gloomy is an animated short, and I don't usually review short anime here, but since I do have something of an affinity for the character, I decided to watch it. Gloomy is a mascot character that you get from UFO catchers here in Japan. They've been around, like, I think this is their 15-year anniversary, which is why they made the anime. They were really, really popular, like, 10 years ago. Like, you could actually go to Gloomy stores instead of just getting stuff from the UFO catchers. Gloomy is a bear, and Pity-kun is his owner. Now, the problem is that Gloomy forgets that he's not supposed to eat people, so he's Gloomy the naughty grizzly bear. He also weighs 400 pomegranates, or something like that. There's little pieces of lore, like there's a little storybook that you can buy that I don't have, and it's in Japanese anyway. So, when I first heard there was going to be an anime, I was kind of worried, because I was like, it's one joke. It's a pet bear that eats people. But then I saw it was going to be a 1-minute short anime. So the episodes are only 1 minute long. And I thought, like, okay, that sounds good. That's, like, just enough time where you can, like, get a little joke off and it's not going to get tired. It did not work at all. I love this character, and the episodes are only 1 minute long, like, once you exclude the opening and the ending. And I only managed to watch 4. The only good news is that it has in no way ruined my feelings towards the character because, frankly, I can't remember anything that happened in those 4 minutes. Well, that's it for the spring 2021 anime season. So far, I'm cautiously optimistic about the summer season. I've seen a lot of interesting shows. I don't have, like, an obvious contender for show of the season yet, but we'll just have to see. Also, we have the return of Baccarina, so I'm happy anyway. As always, you can follow me on Twitter if you want to see my first impressions of these shows. See you next time in my new apartment. Bye-bye. Bishan Enchante Dan, or the Pretty Boy Detective Club. Why did I fuck up the English? I want the initial premise back. I want a dark fantasy girl. I do want a dark fantasy girl. Oh, that's some Freudian shit there. I'm not an expert on the cute girls doing cute girl... I would like to be an expert on cute girls doing cute girls. Ugh. No! It is 34 degrees outside and I'm wearing a gloomy onesie and I am melting. Oh, there goes the towel.